Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of the Football Experience. Caleb, we're back after an amazing weekend if you're an Arsenal or City fan. Not so much if you're a Liverpool fan. But considering where you guys came from, considering the scoreline that you guys had to recover, I don't know. You guys almost got away with it. But how are you feeling after an amazing weekend of results and goal action?
It was a good weekend of football.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, obviously the two major games were from the Premier League, but actually, I don't think you got to guess which league I found myself watching the most of this weekend, actually.
Italian league.
Ooh, that was probably second most, but I actually found myself watching a lot of the French league.
Yeah.
So that sort of gave me an idea for something we could do if we have time on today's pod, or maybe it might be the early one next week because we're going to review a few of the fixtures. We'll see where we're at after that, and we're going to obviously talk about Champions League in the later pod in the week. So whenever we get time in the near future, I want to come back to that idea. But
Right.
yeah, French league, watching a lot of that, and it was quite a good watch for the most part. Most of those games.
The old Le Farmers League. But look,
Iliad just keeps scoring in it.
all right. Do you want to start off on the beast incarnate that is Erling Haaland, or do you want to start off on the London derby, on the North London derby? Because there was another London derby, but the North London derby, to be more specific.
Well, I'll be honest. I don't think I have any new insight, anything that's gonna be really of any interest, and so that no one else has said yet about Haaland, because you could just throw out all the superlatives for him. He's scary, and I guess that's the word we keep coming back to for him and for City. But I mean, I don't know what else I'm going to say at this point that's gonna interest people now.
Well, it looks like we're starting off with City then. I think I was listening to I try to listen to Talk Sport, especially the one with Jim White and Simon Jordan. I enjoy that one the most. It seems to be the most insightful one for me. And they had Graham Souness on the Monday show, and I think he summed it up perfectly. Look, I know we've discussed this. You're not the biggest fan of him, and look, I'm gonna get into him once we get into the Arsenal game. But I think the way that he described Haaland was absolutely perfect. Do you remember back in high school when there was two sides of it? So when you were in year 7 or year 8, and you were playing football, and then the year 11s or 12s would come along, and they'll just have their way with you pretty much, or you'll try to join in with them just because you want the challenge, but there's no way that you're gonna outmuscle them, you're gonna outrun them. They just ragdoll you pretty much. And I remember that back from playing football when I was in high school. I was lucky enough that I had my growth spurt early, so I didn't have that challenge as much as other kids. But when I was in the older year levels, the year 9s and the year 10s used to join in with us, and it was just too easy. But yeah, I think that's the perfect way to describe it. He's 20 years old or 21 years old, and he's
22, I think. Yeah.
It's almost like he's a grown man playing against 17, 18 year olds. That's almost what it feels like. He's just having his way with the league.
I would go along with that. I mean, it's the proof is in the pudding at the moment. 3 hat-tricks in consecutive home games is just ridiculous.
Not only that, did you hear the other stat as well with that?
Well, which one?
So
are you going for?
in 8 games, he has the same.
Yeah.
He has the same amount of hat tricks as Jamie Vardy, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Frank Lampard.
Oh, okay, that's the one you're going for. What was the other one? Fastest to 14, 15 goals, however many he's on. And I think
14, whatever it is, yeah.
40 games ahead of Michael Owen or something. It was something like that. So He's here to break all the records. It looks like he will. Um, my guess at the moment, and this is only because we've never seen anyone get into such ridiculous numbers yet. But if anyone's going to do it, it's probably going to be this guy. But I made a conservative guess on the weekend watching him with a few of our mates, and I said I think he'll get to 36 goals for the Premier League season. It's
I,
probably too
I
conservative,
reckon he's
but
hitting 40.
I haven't seen anyone get into 40, so I'm not going to predict anyone to get into 40 until it happens. But if it's going to happen, it feels like this season, and it feels like him.
But you know the other thing,
Um,
just before you go on, like
yeah,
he's 7 goals off last year's Golden Boot winner. Like, the Golden Boot winner won it with 21 last year, and he's 7 goals off that with 30 games left.
it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's. I don't know what we're meant to do with this guy at this point. And he's played 8 games. But I think your physical point is pretty perfect, especially in a league that prides itself on its physicality, and wants to play, for the most part, most teams want to play a physical style game. I mean, he's made for the league
Yeah,
because, I mean, I think if you were to see him maybe in a Serie A, then maybe he wouldn't be as explosive as he is right now because it's a totally different game. I think goals are a lot harder to come by in Serie A for some reason as well. Even though the quality of maybe defenders and players isn't as good, it's just a completely different game that
I don't know.
doesn't really.
Lukaku's dominated it 2 years ago. He got like what 25 goals
Yeah,
or
but he's
something.
not on these kinds of numbers. He dominated it for Serie A, but maybe Spain's the other one where he could score
Yeah, well, we
a
see
buttload of goals because
Lewandowski.
we've seen two players, and now we're seeing Lewandowski, of course, who we might touch on later.
Yeah,
But we've never seen a player like this. We've seen physical presences up front, but what you normally have with a physical presence is what maybe they're maybe 6'1", 6'2", if they're going to be quick, and if they start getting taller than 6'2", generally they're not their pace is nothing to concern you. This guy's 6'5", and he's lightning quick. The guy can play basketball.
yeah.
He's that tall that he wouldn't be a tall basketballer, but he could play basketball and be maybe an effective wing or something like that. So I don't know how to stop him. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You can't sit deep on them because he's so good in the air. You can't push high on them because he's so good in behind, and he has maybe the best creator of chances, the best assist man in the world playing behind him.
Yeah.
So I keep going back to my point about this feels like Golden State when they got Kevin Durant. It feels overpowering, feels like a wrap. But let's see when they play Arsenal because that is now the game I think everybody is looking forward to in the Premier League.
I think the one, if you're not a City fan, I think the one joy you can get from the game is that Walker went off injured, and it wasn't an impact injury. It seemed like it was, I think, with the same injury that he had last year against when he like around that Real Madrid Champions League semi-final tie. Especially in the second, he didn't play the first leg, but he played the second, and he went off after 60 or 70 minutes, with that muscle strain in his calf or something like that. It looks like. So I guess that's one one joy if you're not a City fan.
Well, watch
Also
Sergi
Stones.
Gomez just watch Sergi Gomez come in at left back and just slot in seamlessly and look
Yeah,
great because he looked pretty good when he did come on as well. I know the game was over, but and versatile as well. He was using him central midfield by the end of the game. So and it puts João Cancelo to right back, which is where I prefer him. So I don't know. It's like obviously they're going to lose something because Kyle Walker's a good defender.
yeah, and good
But
going forward as well.
man, it kind of makes it at least a little bit more fair. There's maybe a player you can target in the City defense. So. But they had Laporte come back on as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know. You give and you take with this.
But I wrote down a couple of talking points from from the game. I don't know what to get into first. Like, firstly, I wrote down Swiss cheese.
Swiss cheese.
Swiss cheese. We're going back on the cheese narrative. But I just see like the Man United midfield and defense was just Swiss cheese. Like City was just finding gaps, carving them open, just having their way with them, and just and like the first thing that came to mind was like I was like the question was how the hell did this team beat Liverpool and Arsenal? Like how, especially Arsenal as well. Like how did Arsenal allow themselves to get beat by this team? Like
I think they're a different proposition at home. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
yeah, and I guess there was the international
City
break as well, which could have ruined momentum or rhythm.
and since City have become an elite team in England, they have a sneaky. Probably wouldn't expect it, but they have a sneaky, excellent home record. It's up there with anyone, and you probably wouldn't expect it because you always call the City fans plastic and whatnot. But in the league in particular, I don't know what happens on Champions League nights where that place just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same. But on league games, yeah, they really get behind the team and they have a really good home record. So we were previewing the game and we were previewing it as though Rashford wasn't going to play.
Yeah, he was a doubt.
Exactly. We thought if that's going to happen, United have no chance. Well, it turns out they just didn't have a chance anyway, even with him playing. But he looked rusty. He looked like a player who'd trained maybe once going into the game. But on the flip side, Marcus Rashford can just play like that because he hasn't shown himself to be a consistently very good player yet. So it could just be that case as well. But I thought on your Swiss cheese note, I thought that was actually a problem for a lot of United players. I thought they seemed to obviously face with the toughest challenge that the Premier League has to offer. A lot of those players seem to regress back to the pre-levels of this little run. Like a Scott McTominay, for example. He looked like old Scott McTominay. He wasn't clogging up the right gaps. He was leaving Eriksen exposed next to him. Obviously, any time that you asked him to get on the ball, he didn't give you much. I don't know if that's ever going to change, but he gave away one shocker in the first half in particular, which was just diabolical. Malacia, look, he's fine. He's a good defender. He kind of reminds me of, until I see more, I'm going to call him Dutch Aaron Wan-Bissaka. By the way, I don't think Wan-Bissaka is terrible. I just think he's lost his confidence.
Yeah.
At United, he's still a good one-on-one defender, but he looks in that mold where you've got a good defender, but he can't really offer you much on the ball. So hopefully for United fans that improves. They were overplaying at the back as well, using De Gea far too much. Sancho and Anthony, especially Anthony, way too happy just to pass backwards. Even though he scored that beauty in the second half,
fantastic goal.
It was a good goal, and I guess for me, I prefer his position to maybe be a bit closer to goal for Anthony because when he gets wide, sometimes he's just too content to like sit the ball onto his left foot, try and cross it in. If he can't cross it in, he'll just pass it backwards. He needs to learn how to go on the outside and offer a dual threat because that was way too easy for City to deal with every time he got the ball. Eriksen, I mean, looked like he was out of place in holding midfield. Obviously, I touched on McTominay didn't help him, but the way he loses Foden for the first goal is like I don't care. I don't care if you're a striker. If you find yourself in that position, do your defensive work, and he just completely loses his man. What an unbelievable finish by Phil Foden, and we haven't even talked about the fact that Phil Foden also ended up with a hat trick in this game. So. And I touched on I think earlier in the season, just look at the dynamic. I flagged the dynamic between Foden and Haaland. Well, I think we can put that to bed. Those guys look so happy to be playing with each other as well now. Haaland looks so happy to be helping Foden get his hat trick, and
I think he assisted him twice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And everything looks so rosy for City at the moment. And United, I don't know. I said this because I was watching with a United friend, and I said I don't think it's a disaster. You got completely outclassed by a really good team, but I thought you know how you always ask the question, was it this team being so poor or this team being so good? If I had to pick one for this game, I'd say it was City being so good.
Yes, especially if you take that first half, like they were immense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they just went into they didn't go into second gear. They went into first gear in the second half, like
Yeah, I
or
know.
like no gear at all.
But,
They just turned the engine off.
and it's probably a good tool for Pep because he was displeased. He wasn't happy in his post match interview,
Oh yeah,
and rightly so. To lose the second half and just concede 3 goals when you were cruising, you wouldn't be happy. But I thought early in the game, I actually said this to our friends that I was watching it with, that there were going to be chances in the game for United because Gundogan was the only holding midfielder, and it makes a massive difference when you don't have the presence of Rodri in there. But United just couldn't hold on because City was so irrepressible with the ball, and Gundogan gives you so much in that role when you have the ball, and they just weren't able to hold on for dear life in those early stages, and City just blew them away. It reminded me, and I think I've touched on this as well. It reminded me of where Arsenal were last season because Arsenal went to the Etihad and got destroyed last season. United have done it this season. Don't have that presence up front. Don't have a threat up front. So there's no doubt that's where United need to improve in not this transfer window in terms of January, but probably next summer. Look to bring in a striker. I floated out Mitrovic, but that's like a short-term fix, and I don't know how much you'd have to spend on him. But if things don't improve over in Juve, you could look at targeting his Serbian teammate in Vlahovic, because I think if United can continue progressing the way they were before this game and show that they're in the right direction, and I know Juve won on the weekend, 3-0 against Bologna, but I haven't seen that game. But if they continue to sort of stumble and falter, then how long is Vlahovic going to want to stay there? He's probably the one I would love to see in the Premier League. Maybe the most realistic one anyway. But yeah, United they look where Arsenal were last season. Still inconsistent, can still pull in performances like this when faced with the biggest challenge. So I guess what we'll be judging them on is the games, not against Manchester City.
I think you're disrespecting Arsenal because at least Arsenal looked good when they played at times. Like United haven't looked good. Like, and they still don't have any. Like, you can see, especially like going from last season to this season, you can see that there was the building blocks and the foundation being built last season in the way that they want to play, but they didn't. And then obviously with the additions of Saliba at centre back, Jesus up front, and then Zinchenko / Tierney at left back, it's elevated them and sort of completed the picture into how they wanted to play last season. So, and whereas United, they're not even close to playing the way that United played last season. So that's a bit disrespectful the way that you're making that comparison, unless you're only comparing them to the way that they're playing inconsistently.
Well, that's the main one, but I also just don't agree with that. I think United in that little run started to show patterns. They started to show intensity. They brought Malacia in, so you could point to him sort of like your Tierney. Obviously, at this stage, not as good as Tierney. I think Tierney maybe came with a bigger rep as well. But yeah, I don't agree with that because I thought United were showing positive things.
I'd still rather watch Arsenal play last season than United this season.
And that's subjective.
It looks better, like the way they played.
Yeah, they looked all right, but that's completely subjective because it just depends what kind of football you want to watch. I think United are a bit more direct, but they're very fluid in the front areas, and when those front four are clicking, they're pretty good to watch. When Eriksen can get on the ball, good to watch his range of passing. So, I don't know. I think that's just a subjective one. I think United were looking all right going into this, but you're still going to have to deal with them being inconsistent and throwing in performances like this at this stage of their development as a team under Ten Hag.
But the other thing is though that they don't have the luxury or the excuse of having the youngest team in the Premier League. They have, I'd say, would it be like one of the oldest or somewhere up there? Because like Varane's 30, Ronaldo's 37, Rashford's already like 26 or 27. Maguire's 29, I think. So like they have De Gea's 30 as well. They also don't have that excuse as well that they have a young team. Like they have a pretty experienced team on paper. Maybe not necessarily chemistry wise experienced or like playing
If you
together.
ask Ten Hag, though, I think he would point that to being a problem rather than an advantage. I think he'd want all his players to be a bit younger and on the
Yeah,
same
no,
timeline so that he can mold them.
exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, and that's why, like you said it perfectly, like on the same timeline. Like at least Arsenal's like all pretty much all on the same timeline. They're all between like that 21 to 25 year range. But like while we're still on the Manchester derby, the other talking points, and you mentioned McTominay, and like the one thing that I wrote down here is, where is Casemiro? You signed him for 60,000, or if only 60,000, 60 mil. So he was pretty much your big money signing up until you brought in Anthony for 90 mil. Why is he on the bench? Why is he starting on the bench for the Manchester derby? I think I had him in my second team last year, as my second best defensive mid. I think I had Rodby as my first defensive mid. You had him as your best. So pretty much arguably the best defensive mid in the world. Just won the Champions League. Consistently in the starting 11 for Real Madrid. And this guy goes from that to being a bench warmer at United. To being replaced by Scott McTominay for the Manchester derby. What's up with that?
Well, the only thing I'll say is that he wasn't replaced by McTominay because United's run has come with Scott McTominay playing in the role. So I can understand the decision not to play him because you've been rolling with a different guy in, and managers tend to be pretty reluctant to change things that are working. But I thought if you were going to, and you should be looking to get this guy into the team for all the reasons you just said, this was the time to get him into the team. After an international break, I know he went with Brazil, so obviously you didn't have time to work with him, but it's still after an international break. All the players have come back and you've got this massive fixture straight after. That's probably the time where you just say, all right, we're going forward with this guy, even if it's next to McTominay for this game, just to give you a bit more solidity. I know that would be diabolical for when United have the ball, but they didn't have the ball much anyway in this game. So hindsight's obviously 2020. It might have been a better idea to go with a bit more solidity in that midfield. Look, I will also say in Ten Hag's defence, when I have seen Casemiro come on, he looks like he's still adjusting to the pace of the Premier League, to be fair. The thing is that in La Liga, I think you get that split second longer to get back into position. The game's not as quick over there, so you do have a little bit more time to cover in those gaps that you need to cover in. I think maybe he's a split second slow in terms of that at the moment and in terms of in possession of the ball, which central midfielders normally have a tough time of adjusting to how much pressure you come under straight away. Once he does, he'll look fine. I'm not worried about it. But there's two just little things where you can point to and say, look, I understand why Ten Hag didn't do it, but obviously after this result, that's going to come under scrutiny, and you've got to probably look at bringing him into the team for a statement game like this. And just one thing I wanted to little touch on just before you go into it or go on to the next point, whatever. I don't know if you saw him and Ronaldo sitting on the bench together, but they looked very chummy. So is that a case of, we know Ronaldo's not happy because he's not playing? Is Ten Hag maybe a little bit threatened by Casemiro coming into the team? Does he have another voice that, well, Ronaldo can influence? Because I think they're pretty good friends in terms of, you don't normally think of Ronaldo having many football friends, but these two feel like they're a little. These two feel like they're a little bit close. So, if Ronaldo's in his ear, just talking all kinds of crap about Ten Hag, I think Ten Hag might feel a bit threatened, but that's just reading tea leaves from the outside. But yeah, in hindsight, Casemiro has to be
the
in this game.
the pushback to that with the Casemiro thing is though, why isn't he being fast tracked into the team though? Like, why wasn't he being given more game time against the Southamptons, against the Leicesters, and teams like that? Like, why isn't he? So that, because you know that you're having. I know they lost a week. Actually, they lost two. They had 2 games postponed because of the Queen's death. First, like that, where everyone had their games postponed, and then they had the Leeds. I guess derby. I suppose it would be. You can call it. So they did lose 2 games there. Yeah, but why wasn't he being played before that? So like that you could get him ready for Arsenal, so that you can get him ready for Manchester City as well. Like, also, did he play in the Europa League game that they had against Sheriff?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about that.
I'm not sure.
I'm hoping he did. I'm hoping he got like 90 or 80 minutes. If not, then what the hell's going on there? Like, why isn't he being bedded into the team and fast tracked? That's the question. The other points that I had, now this one was this one is a little bit of fair play, and then it also leads into it actually leads into the goal, the third goal, I think. So basically, you know how Varane went down with that injury, and it wasn't like a tackle. Like, I think Foden kicked the ball into his ankle pretty much, like he blocked it, and then like it twisted it, and then he goes down and he's holding his foot and stuff, and then why the hell are United trying to ask for City to put the ball out of play? Like, what the hell's up with that? Like, I think we've discussed this before. Like, unless it's like a serious head injury or like a broken foot or something like that, which this wasn't, then yeah, put the ball out of play. But like, United players seem to have they almost seem to have switched off, and then they all went and tried to complain about it. And it's like, no, like it wasn't even from like a 50-50 tackle that was arguably like, you know, a misreading from the ref or a misjudgment from the ref. This was like just, you know, your player blocked the ball, it hurt him, he goes down. Like City's all within their rights to keep possession of the ball and to keep attacking until the ball goes out of play, until you guys put the ball out of play, essentially. So, and then that obviously leads to the third goal, I think, because Varane has to go get subbed out. Not subbed out. He has to stay on the touchline till the ref allows him back in. He's not there for the corner. But I think from watching, if you watch some of the one or two of the earlier corners, I don't think Varane's marking Haaland anyway, but he's probably marking space that the ball would have come into.
They touched on it in the halftime coverage over here. That was the exact space where McTominay gets beaten in the air. That was the space that Varane had, and then probably McTominay's the one trying to block Haaland's run instead of Eriksen.
Yeah.
So that one did, him not being on there.
That did all right. So that did, but my point is more along the fact that I don't think United players have any right to complain about City not putting the ball out of play. I'm pretty sure you agree with me on that one, right?
No, they don't have a right, but also at the same time, I do think City maybe could have put the ball out, because it's not like he's rolling around trying to ask for a yellow card or anything. He looked like he was genuinely hurt, and obviously it's fine. Go on, try and finish the first phase of play, but when the ball gets recycled, I think the referee could probably blow his whistle there. The guy hasn't moved in 15, 20 seconds. Like, when you haven't moved, you've got to assume that there's like a proper injury. But I will also say, Varane gets up and continues to play for another 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is. He should have got up in that moment because his team needed him. I know you've rolled your ankle, but normally you can get up and just limp around a little bit on a rolled ankle and you know, like, if a ball comes your way, still at least clear the ball. So I think he should have got up. You're completely right. The United players don't have a right. They don't have a leg to stand on because, like you say,
neither does Varane.
Yeah, and apparently he didn't. But for me, he should have got up. But also the ref or City, once the ball doesn't go in the first phase, then it's like, all right, this guy's been lying there on the edge of the box. It's like in a position. He's not up the field or anything like that. He's right in a crucial position. All right, let's stop the play. Let's use a little bit of common sense here because he hasn't moved. He looks like he's hurt and he's in an important position. But you're right. They don't have a leg to stand on in terms of complaining.
And then the I guess the added point to that, or like the sub point to that, which from the injury that leads on to my next point is, it's very telling that Lindelof is subbed on for him instead of Maguire. So Ten Hag chose...
Maguire was injured.
Was he?
Yeah, he wasn't on the bench. He was behind the bench.
I thought he was on the bench.
Our mate also thought that it was funny how Maguire didn't come on, but...
I didn't think it was funny. I just thought it was telling, because like, you're not subbing on your captain.
Yeah, he wasn't... I don't think he was available. I'll look at the lineups now, but I think he got injured on... international duty, which is a joke that he was even playing international football in the break, but Southgate loved him. I don't know why.
All right. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't look like he's there. It looked. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So all right. I stand corrected on that one, but. But dude, if that was the case, holy shit! Like that would have been like, again, that would have been a talking point, which is why I brought it up.
Yeah, honestly though, even if Maguire was available, if you didn't pick Lindelof over Maguire, I would judge you. Maguire should be nowhere near a good club or a decent reputation club at least. And he should be nowhere near international football at the moment. He is diabolical.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible.
And before we get on to, I guess, the good... Like, we sort of talked about the good that City done, but I'll just touch on my last point that I wrote down. For Foden's third goal, when Haaland slipped him in, did you see what the United players did?
No, I didn't. Go on.
Instead of chasing down Foden, I think like 2 or 3 of them... They're all looking over to the linesman and like first and trying to call for offside instead of closing him down first. And then after the play's gone, then calling for offside. So their instinct or like their behavioral pattern is to complain first and not play the whistle and not close down. So there's something telling there. I don't know whether I'm reading too much into it or not, but I just thought that there was something telling there, like that was what instinctively that they were doing.
I think the situation of the game leads into that a bit, and I'll be fair to them in saying that they're not the only team that does that. I mean, Liverpool are notorious for doing that as well. It's wrong. That shouldn't be your reaction. You should play to the whistle. And in this case, they were wrong because Foden was clearly onside and he scores the goal. So just to be fair to them, I'll point out that other teams do it. And the situation of the game is probably one where you don't want to fight, but that's probably the more telling thing, that they don't want to fight and they don't want to keep playing to the whistle. They don't want to try and get a block in. And that's something that no doubt would enrage Roy Keane, Paul Scholes, Gary Neville, all of that class. So, wrong reaction, and definitely symptomatic of their day that they had, really. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of reaction they get to this performance going forward and see if they could get back on the right track or if this derails them for a little bit.
Yeah. Now to give a little praise, was it Haaland's second goal? The ball from De Bruyne.
Unbelievable.
All right, but like in the lead up to that, like I see De Bruyne, and I think Foden is overlapping on his right, and then I see like De Bruyne just sort of like chip it in like that sort of to the back post or whatever, like that low chip ball, like it just and I'm like. When it first came off his foot, I'm like, oh, you dickhead! Like, why didn't you pass it off to Foden for Foden to square it? And then I see Haaland just like jump at it and put it in the back. And I'm like, holy shit! Like, how the hell did De Bruyne spot like that gap and to put it into that area, knowing that Haaland is gonna Mr. Elastic Man that shit and put it in the back of the net? Like, Jesus, man, like amazing,
Scary.
amazing.
Scary. It's the word. It's the word that just keeps coming to mind. And this partnership has their skill sets are unbelievably complementary, and it has the chance to be right up there with any partnership we've seen in the Premier League in terms of strike partnerships or maybe attacking midfielder and striker. It's sort of it's on a different level, but it kind of reminds me of like Gerard Torres when Gerard
I was
started
just
playing
about to
with
say
Cam.
Gerard
Yeah,
Torres. Yeah.
yeah. But I think this one's even on a scarier level, especially
Oh
when you
yeah.
put the talent of the rest of the team around them, because we saw in the Champions League game, it wasn't De Bruyne delivering for Haaland's ridiculous finish. It was João Cancelo, and he has that in his locker. Gundogan has done it on a few occasions this season. Foden can supply. Grealish had a good game as well. I guess there's a little bit of praise to be given out there. I thought he started the game really well and played really well. But yes,
I think
just it's the word is scary.
his run led to Dallow's early yellow card, which put him on the
Yeah,
back foot. So I think it was like in the first 5 minutes or something. It was before the first
yeah.
goal. So like you're
Second minute, I think.
yeah. So your right back already has a yellow card in the second minute. It's like okay, that's gonna be a horror night for him pretty much.
Um, and Malacia got a quick one as well.
Yeah, I thought. From memory, I thought he got a quick one as well. So once both your left and right backs are on early yellow cards, and your wingers are just gonna have a field day for the rest of the afternoon, and they pretty much did. Like it was that first half was like torture for United fans, pretty much, or the United team. Do you have anything else to add? I just before you do, I think that today apparently the news was that Ten Hag was holding like a crisis meeting with the team where basically players could air their grievances publicly within the team about other players. So basically, if a player has a problem with another player, or like you just like an open floor to just complain and like spill everything, good or bad, probably mostly bad. So he's having that already as well. So after the Brentford loss, he's making them run 13 Ks. Now after this loss, he's having I don't know an open floor session with the team.
I guess you're hoping as a United fan that it has the same effect, but that's a little bit worrying if that is the case, because I don't think after this game, after one game, because you've been in good form before that, I don't think you need to be going to meetings like that. It's just a bad loss where you didn't do well enough given the stakes of the game, but at the same time you came up against a team who, and it might be hyperbole, it might be a little bit premature to say, but this team easily has the potential to be at least an all-time great Premier League team, if not the all-time greatest Premier League team. Like, this team looks invincible at the moment. Whether they'll go the whole season unbeaten, time will tell, and we touched on that, and this will be a good segue for you. We touched on that Arsenal game that we're all waiting for as Premier League watchers. But honestly, like teams, and I made this point maybe at the start of the season when City kept going 2-0 down. Teams are beaten before they play City. And even when they're in a position where they look like they could get something from the game, they're still beaten. So what the hell do you do against this team? So for United to be going to closed-door meetings, I think is a bit of an overreaction.
But also, why is that information being made public as well? Like, why?
Yeah,
why
and
does
that too.
why does
And
the
that too.
public
That doesn't
need
need
to
to
know?
come out.
I'm not sure whether it was a leak or whether Ten Hag mentioned it, but regardless, like that shouldn't be made public. So like, and you don't hear that stuff going on. Like, all right, for instance, Arsenal's first season under Arteta, or like the second one actually, when they didn't win the FA Cup and they finished 8th in the league, you didn't hear that stuff going on with Arteta and Arsenal, that they were having crisis meetings and stuff like that, because they had some pretty bad losses. Even last year, they had some pretty bad losses against like Liverpool and City, and you didn't hear that stuff going on. You didn't hear that stuff going on at Liverpool when Klopp first came in and he was rebuilding the squad. You didn't hear it. Obviously, didn't hear it at City because Pep pretty much inherited a very good team, which then obviously he made his additions to and changes.
Well, don't forget Pep had his worst season as a manager in that first season.
Finished
at
third.
City. Yeah,
that's his worst season.
Well, they were miles. Well, they were miles off though.
Yeah,
they were nowhere near it that season. But yeah,
but still, like you didn't hear that. You didn't hear that stuff going on, and like all these leaks and stuff like that.
United are notorious for the leaks.
Yeah. Well, leaky defense, leaky everything. But yeah, look, let's get on to happier times, and then we'll get on to miserable times after that. You know where I'm going to lead with that. But the North London derby, I don't know whether to go chronologically in this or to get my air my grievances with Souness first. Because
go where you want to go.
You know what? Alright, so basically, they were talking about it on TalkSport this morning, and then Souness just blurts out the line, like, oh yeah, they beat Arsenal, albeit against 10 men. It's like, fuck off, Souness. Like, they were already winning 2-1. Before that second goal, they were already on the ascendancy. You could see that from the play. So that red card, yes, it had an impact on the game, but I feel that Tottenham were pretty much already beaten, and it was only a matter of time before a third goal was going to go in, because Tottenham would have been forced to open up more and to start playing more. And besides their goal, which came from a Son run where he beat, I think, like 2 or 3 players, and then we couldn't clear our lines because we naively tried to play it out from the back, and then Gabriel made pretty much lunged in. And besides us basically gifting them a penalty, and maybe like a 10-minute spell after that, going into this towards the end of the second half, Arsenal were in complete control of that game. So there was only and then other than that, the only other chance that Tottenham had was that Son cross in from a free kick that Kane touched onto Richarlison, which either Kane was offside or Richarlison was offside from Kane touching it onto him. So VAR would have checked that, and I believe would have been given offside anyway if it went in. But other than that, Tottenham offered absolutely nothing going forward when they had 11 men, and especially obviously when they had 10 men as well. It was pretty much, the question was, is this going to finish an Arsenal win, or is this going to finish a draw because Tottenham managed to just nick one back? And I think that the second goal that we got from the mistake from Lloris, that was just the whole swings and roundabouts. We gave them a goal and they gave us one back. So I think that was deserving of that. But yeah, I don't get this notion why Arsenal is now not getting the praise it deserves just because Tottenham went down to 10 men. We went down to 10 men last year against them at their stadium, and for a much less, I guess you'd say, dangerous foul. I guess it was a second yellow, but much less dangerous foul. And on second look of that, that challenge, it was a red. I've seen other players get reds for that as well, direct reds. Aubameyang got one, I think 2 or 3 years ago for the exact same challenge where studs just above the ankle. It's a red card.
Well, I didn't think I'd be doing this, but I haven't seen the comments, so I would need to put them into context. But if he's literally said albeit against 10 men,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I don't think he's making a big point about the fact that us or Tottenham were down to 10 men. I think he's just throwing in the fact that it was only 2-1, and at 2-1, we saw what happened in the first half. Gabriel, who's never filled me with confidence, can make a mistake. and Tottenham could be right back in the game. So your question about whether it be a draw or an Arsenal win is a valid one. We went into previewing the game, sort of both of it. Obviously you, but for me as a more of a neutral, somewhat hoping that Arsenal won because Tottenham just don't play well enough this season, and they showed it again. But Tottenham are good at what they do. So with 11 men, with enough men behind the ball, they give themselves a chance to counter, to be solid, and then to counter. And when they do counter, they may be one of the best teams in the world in terms of that front three linking up and escaping pressure. Harry Kane's one of the best in the world at receiving the ball and then finding an out ball and then joining in on the attack. So there's always that threat. And if that game was to finish 2-2, 11v11, I wouldn't have been surprised personally, even though it would have been a footballing injustice because Arsenal, in terms of what your eyes see and what most people prefer to watch, are a far superior team to Tottenham. But Tottenham are good at what they do. I must give them credit for that. But in this game, they weren't. And Laurie's mistake is absolutely terrible for a player of his experience, where the game is
He's got
poised
that
as
in
it
him, though.
is. He does. He does.
Yeah.
I've been on this point for years now. I think Lloris is not the be all and end all as a goalkeeper. I don't think he should be French number one, and that makes it hard because he's captain. But I just have been thoroughly unimpressed with him for years now. So, but yeah, that game. Look, in my mind, that game easily could have finished 2-2, 11v11, but it would have been an unjust 2-2. To your point. So I don't know. I'm not defending Souness. I need to contextualize those comments, but I think he's just throwing in the fact that it was 11v10 towards the end of the game, and that's obviously where Arsenal put the game to bed and scored their third goal.
I still think it would have been. I still think we were on the hunt for our third goal even before that,
Yeah.
and it looked like we were going to get the third goal because. Honestly, like Tottenham weren't offering anything. Like we really stifled that front three of Richarlison, Kane, and so on. Like they weren't, like they could never find that pass on like from one player to the next. And Kane wasn't getting on the ball. He wasn't, and when he was getting on the ball, he wasn't finding those passes either because we managed to block those spaces.
Yeah, but the thing is, and you saw it for the goal, they only need to get out once, and that's all.
Which was from our mistake though as well.
Well, exactly. And Arsenal, while they've been exceptional this season, they still do have that in them. They're not a team that's proven to go on and win major trophies yet. So they still do have those mistakes, and Gabriel somewhat proved it in the build-up as well. But yeah, no, Arsenal would definitely deserve the winners. And I felt after the game, my main feeling was a little bit of vindication for individual critiques of players, because Emerson Royale, I've been on his back for ages, and I don't know why he starts in this team. I guess maybe he wants to start Doherty, but Royale's been a part of a team that's been rolling. So maybe in the McTominay sort of mold, it's like, how do I drop this guy? But what a stupid tackle. Martinelli's running backwards. My God.
And he's already in his own half as well.
Yeah, I don't think it was malicious, but it was so stupid. And then he caught him in a way that looked really bad. I think he was just trying to tap his shins and bring him down. But then he's late, his studs are up, and he catches him in a really dangerous way. So absolutely stupid. And the other vindication is, I already touched on it, I'm not a huge fan of Gabriel. I think he's a good third choice centre back if you want to go on and win the league and be in contention for other trophies. But obviously he makes a mistake for the penalty, which is another stupid mistake. Completely loses his composure, decides to jump in unnecessarily and gives away the penalty. So in terms of my individual critiques of players, it's good for you that one didn't come back to bite you. But on another day, that game maybe could finish 1-1. And if Lloris doesn't make that mistake, there's every chance that game maybe finishes 1-1. So, but Arsenal, impressive again. Definitely the second best team in England, and that's why we're all looking forward to City versus Arsenal in the coming weeks.
Yeah, that game was actually meant to I think it was meant to happen in the coming weeks, but it's been rescheduled because of the whole Queen's death and everything. So they're not sure when they're going to fit it in. So it might even happen after. Would it happen after the World Cup or if they
I
can't find
hope
time? Because
not.
I think
But it
Arsenal's
might.
playing, I think
Yeah, if they
Arsenal's playing
can't.
9 games this month. Like when you like,
Yeah, well, it's been rescheduled because of your game against PSV that they
yeah,
had to reschedule. Yeah.
yeah. But there was one other thing that I wanted to mention. I had, like, your whole vindication, all that stuff, and like, what the other thing that I thought of, how Martinelli and Jesus weren't picked for the Brazil squad. I'm like, these guys came here. They like, it's the Michael Jordan meme. they took it personally. Like especially Jesus, man. He came out. He was a nightmare to deal with. Like, if I was a defender, I would hate. I'm not sure who I'd hate playing more against, like Haaland or Jesus, because Jesus is like small and nimble, and if you catch him, he's gonna go down, and you're gonna get yellow carded or even red carded. Whereas like Haaland is just like, he's gonna outmuscle you, he's gonna outpace you as well, and Jesus as well. He can outpace you too, but like, I don't know who's worse to play against, to be honest. Probably Haaland, just because he has that aerial threat as well, but he doesn't have. He's a different type of striker. Like he likes to finish off plays, whereas Jesus likes to be in the build up of plays. So they're a different mold, but they're both. It seems like Jesus is playing with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder as well, and trying to prove himself. And I think the guys from Arsenal Fan TV, I think they said like he really reminds them of Alexis Sanchez, like the way that he plays, like with so much energy, the way he can carry the ball and shift it from side to side. And also, there was that one moment, I think in the first, I think it was in the first half. I think it was after the Tottenham penalty, where I think he takes on like 2 or 3 players inside the box, and he actually gets knocked down. Where I can't remember what I think it might have been Dyer or one of the other defenders, like puts his leg across him, and because he went through 2 defenders, I'm not sure why that one wasn't given for a penalty. It would have been a little bit soft, but it was similar to the Gabriel and Richarlison one. So a little bit softer.
I don't think I remember that. Yeah,
there was a moment there where it's like, this one probably could have been a penalty shot, and it's a little bit softer, but it's outside of the box. It's a foul, and he was in on goal as well. So I'm not sure why that wasn't given as a penalty if you're going to give it as a foul, like in the middle of the field or something. And like he wasn't going to the line; he was going directly to goal as well. So yeah, there's a little bit of for me. There's a little bit of questions there, but overall, like, extremely impressive from Arsenal. Like the way that they didn't buckle under pressure as well. Like when they did go to 1-1 from a mistake as well. It was a little bit nervy there, or that 10-minute spell, but they dealt with it, which was good. And man, I got to give praises to Partey, like not just for his goal, but like he was fantastic. Like whenever he was so calm on the ball, and whenever he'd get the ball, like he'd manage to shift and take a player out of play, and then find a pass. And he offers a little bit different to a Lokonga or an El Neni, because he's always trying to find the pass forward instead of sideways as well. And it's good that he actually got to get taken off in like the 70th minute and like be wrapped up in wool pretty much. So yeah, hopefully the only thing that I guess could derail this season is injuries. I don't think form will play as big of a factor, in all honesty. Like, because we seem to now have built on that mentality especially from last season, and like the kids are now a year older as well, and the team is now a year older, because like it's essentially the same team from last year.
Yeah, and on that point, I think you're right. The form is a year further progressed now, so I don't think they. Obviously, we mentioned them maybe being a bit shaky after the goal, but it wasn't for very long, and most teams become on tilt really quickly. Teams and players, like once something goes against them, they become on tilt really quickly. There's not many not many teams and not many clubs in the world that are sort of resistant to that and players for that matter. When things go against them and they have a rough maybe minute or so, then it's sort of the analogy I use, and I find this when I'm driving. If you're having like a bad driving day and you do something a little bit stupid, like at some point, for the next like 5 minutes, I'll just feel like a little bit like on edge in the car. It's like, fuck, I did something stupid, like man, and then you'll just start being a little bit edgy behind the wheel. I feel like a lot of players and a lot of teams are a bit like that. So when something goes against them, they get on tilt pretty quickly, but they dealt with that moment really well, and that goes into your sort of form and your experience point about Arsenal. I agree with that. That I don't think form shall be a problem. I don't even think it'll be injuries that will be a problem. For me, it'll be injury, and it's to the guy that you just wanted to praise, Thomas Partey. If he gets injured, I guess in basketball terms, they call it VORP, value over replacement, but his value over his replacement is higher than anyone else in that Arsenal squad. Even if Jesus got injured, you've still got really good attacking players. It's not the same because he gives you somewhat more of it's not even the focal point, it's more the pressing point. He gives you the point to press of, which has been really impressive this season in terms of his counter press and his leading the line in terms of pressing. But throughout the whole team, the player that you can't lose is Partey, because he was immense in this game. He's been immense this season, and just a little point as well. Like he scores an absolute unbelievable goal to open the scoring.
Yeah, exactly.
But on the same point, I would put the chances of that goal at like a 2 out of 10, maybe 3 out of 10. Because
we've seen that. We've seen him sky those. Like he has like one or two of those every single game, and he absolutely skies them.
So from a Tottenham perspective, like what more can you do? You can maybe close out the shot a little bit more, but like you say, we have seen him sky them. So are we really scared of him shooting from there? We should have been, but so like I agree. Footballing wise, this was a just result, not just for today, but for the whole season. But also, I will acknowledge on other days, Tottenham could be walking away from there with a point as well. So I'm not down on Tottenham in terms of how they should be progressing towards top four and maybe a title challenge, but that depends on City and Arsenal at this point. I think it has knocked them back a peg in terms of a title challenge, but
I don't think they're
I'm not
challenging
really
for the
down.
title. No.
Well, I still don't think
I honestly
anyone's.
can't see it.
I still don't think anyone's challenging for the title.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, but I know Arsenal are top at the moment, but City just look irrepressible. So yeah, again, that just hinges on how Arsenal do in their upcoming games against big teams. Because I guess the contrast, just to finish my point, is we've seen what happens when things go well for Arsenal in this game, but we also saw the flip side where things went against them at Old Trafford against United. So they've got Liverpool next weekend. That's even though Liverpool are in terrible form.
It's still Liverpool.
It's still Liverpool, exactly. So it's still a big test. It's still a big challenge, and we get
it's
to
at
see
Anfield
Arsenal.
as well, right?
Yeah, and we get to see Arsenal under that microscope. I don't know if it was at Anfield, but we get to see Arsenal under that microscope again and see how they do against big teams and if they play positively again. And I think in these games, things need to go your way as well. So, yeah, but like I keep saying, impressive. Maybe now put themselves as the only team to potentially challenge City.
Yeah, we'll see. I want to see how. Firstly, because of all these reschedulings and delays, and like the fact that they're playing 9 games this month, so that's what, a game every 3 days or every 4 days. But like 9 games in a month, I think generally there's about 7 games every month if you're playing in Europe as well. So this one's a little bit congested for them. So we need to see how they can handle it, and because like they got all these tough teams as well. Like they got Liverpool. I'm not sure whether City's going to be rescheduled for this month or not. But yeah, like they just beat Tottenham as well. I'm not sure what other teams. Oh, they got Chelsea at the end of the month as well. So they got some. There's some tough games in there for this month. But like the other thing is like I think the squad overall is better, so at least they can rotate for the Europa League as well. So that will be that's handy. Whereas like if we took last season's squad, you would pretty much have to play like Martinelli would have to play like every single game. Saka would have to play every single game. At least you can take them off for those Europa League games. And one thing just to finish up on, unless you have something else to add, you talked about home form for City. I think going into this game, I think Arsenal were unbeaten at the Emirates in 29 games in all competitions. So I think they have that's a home. Now it's 30. So they have an impressive home record themselves.
Yeah, and over years I've been a bit critical of the supporters of the Emirates, but the team's doing well and giving them reason to get behind it, and they are doing so. So that's a good record to have.
Yeah, I'm at least that's what the commentator said. So I'm not. I can't be stuff fact checking that, but I'm just gonna go off of. They should get their facts straight. They're professionals. They're getting paid to blurt out these facts.
We do our diligent work on the pod.
Well, our diligent work is relying on paid people to do their due diligence. So we'll move on to the other. I guess. Would you say it's a shock result, or it could have been a shock result? Liverpool v Brighton.
Well, on form, you can't say it's a shock result
because I know they changed manager. Dude, fuck, what a player!
Well, he's been a full Belgium international for a while, and he seems to have gone to the next level this season, without a doubt. But yeah, I don't think it's a shock. I was disappointed to see the way Liverpool were playing. Admittedly, I already knew the result going into watching this game, so I had two games on at once, and I was focusing on one of those French games I was watching over the weekend. But it was disappointing to see the way we played after Ajax, because I thought we were so much more defensively responsible against Ajax, and now you have Henderson back in the team, but he wanted to use Henderson in that traditional overlapping, getting forward role that he likes to use Henderson in, and I think it's just wrong at this stage of his career and at this stage of where Liverpool's development, regression, whatever you want to call it. I think he's better suited for him and for the team to play a little bit closer to Fabinho to offer more solidity. I know Thiago's in the team, and I guess he wants Thiago more as the D player, but maybe it's time to see Thiago a little bit more advanced, helping link up play in those roles a little bit more advanced. Can you get the ball to him with Henderson and Fabinho as the deeper ones? That might be a question. Maybe it's all three of them, and then the front three have to do a lot of work between them to score. But when your defence is so porous, when you're conceding 3 goals at home to Brighton, and they created more than enough to get those 3 goals and deserve those 3 goals. To be fair, we could have had 5 or 6 as well. I think it was that kind of game. It was a fun game to watch. A lot of chances for both teams, and I'm not getting down on us and saying we were thoroughly outplayed. The first 15 minutes, 20 minutes, we definitely were. And it's disappointing that we didn't, because we've talked about this season. We come out for games and we're low energy and we don't match the work rate of the opposition, and it happened again. And it was disappointing because it looked like there was a potential that we somewhat turned a corner in the Ajax game before the international break. But then we just regressed back to this kind of performance again. So there's no illusions of us being the second best team in England this season. I know that was consensus going into the season. It's not going to happen. I think it's safe to say that. I know I'm not completely out on this team because I know they have the quality to put a run together. But that run will only take us to top 4 now. It's not going to take us to a title challenge. That's gone. That's completely gone. It can take us to a Champions League challenge because of the format of that tournament. If you have everyone fit and they get up for those games. But again, that Napoli game away scared me that you couldn't get up for that game. So yeah, this team's off what it's been. I think it's done in terms of the old iteration of what it was. It's going to have to be a new iteration of Liverpool going forward. But having said that, they can still easily, for me, they can still qualify for top four. They've only lost one game all season, so if you're looking for positives, we're still hard to beat. We're still Liverpool. We still make you work for your win. You have to play well, and Brighton did play well to create all those chances. And you can see as well, for most of the opposition, even this season, when we play them, they have moments where they look gassed and they look on the ropes, even if they're playing well, because of the physical effort they have to put into games to outwork Liverpool and to match that at least. But obviously this season it's more they are outworking. They're not just matching our work rate because we're not working hard. So in terms of positives, good character to come back from 2-0 down, take the lead as well. Still only one defeat in the Premier League, like I said. But in terms of negatives, that defence is just horrendous. Honestly, it's horrendous. And Alisson had a really good game, but he still could have done better for the second and third goals. Van Dijk is not a presence. He doesn't scare anyone at the moment, like the way he used to. Trent, we've been through it, but there's no options in the squad to give him more protection and maybe try him in a new position, like I've been calling for a while. And the front three, a little thing to mention just before I get off this and let you have the reins is my idea of playing out Mane and Salah together this season and just playing them to the end of their contract, I think is looking better and better every week we go by, because my problem now is that Salah, we've talked about the imbalance that he may create in terms of his wages. But for me, it's an imbalance he somewhat creates in terms of his profile compared to the other players in that front three. Maybe we're still a little bit too Salah conscious. And if we had a front three where they were all players like Diaz, I know Jota's been pretty good for a couple of seasons now, but he's still one who isn't fully established. And even Nunez, who I think was the wrong signing, looking at the lack of depth in our midfield now, spending that much money on a player who I think we did need a striker, but could we have got a cheaper one? But yeah, I think there's an imbalance in terms of reputation and stature in that front three. Whereas, yeah, if we had a Jota, Luis Diaz and Nunez up front, none of those players look at each other and think that guy is clearly the guy with the status, the guy who is the top dog. Whereas with Salah as one of those three, you have to look at Salah and say he is the top dog. And when he's not scoring goals, and maybe it's because of what I mentioned, we're just not playing well, and he's not getting those chances. But yeah, there's no the timeline of that front three isn't matched up, and now we've got Mo Salah who's 30 plus, and he's paid all that money on a big contract. So it's just looking more and more like it probably would have been a good idea just to play Mane and Salah to the end of their contracts and just run it back for this season and then rebuild the season after. But as it is, we're trying to rebuild now and not doing a great job of it.
I think that the imbalance point is a good one to make because, like, yeah, you pretty much just have Salah there as a threat on the right wing, but on the left wing, and like Diaz didn't even play the first half of this game either. Whereas going off of last season and then even this season, like he looks like a threat, but you'd still want Mane there. So, and like I'll just compare that to, for instance, a team like Arsenal, where like you have Saka. Tottenham were tripling up on him at some points of the game, but then you have Martinelli on the other wing, who's as big a threat as Saka. So it doesn't matter if you double up or triple up on him. There's as threatening a player. Whereas like in your team, like you said, there's a bit of an imbalance there, going through the middle and also on the left wing. But the biggest talking point is obviously Trent, because he's being really, really exposed this season, and there's no right back for you guys to at least give Trent a rest or take him out of the squad. Like who replaces him? Gomez? He's a centre back, right back, but there's more sort of maybe in the Ben White sort of mold, I guess.
Definitely not as good this season.
Yeah, so like,
but at his peak,
what?
yeah.
So what do you do about Trent? Like, do you move him into midfield and play 3 at the back? Maybe put Fabinho as one of the centre backs or something. I don't know. How do you fix that problem? Because the blueprint is essentially there. Like, he's been exposed in multiple games, even from last season going into this season. And now more and more teams are starting to latch onto that. And then I've also raised the question on Robertson. What if you move Van Dijk over to the right-hand side to help Trent out, but then Robertson starts getting exposed? Because I've seen Robertson get exposed as well.
Well, obviously Robertson's injured at the moment, so it was Tsimikas in this game. But it goes back to the point of not having the options. And Joe Gomez quickly this season made himself not an option as well, because when we had to play him, I know it was centre back, but he was absolutely terrible. And he'd be very reluctant to try and put him in the team anytime soon.
What's happening with where's Kanate? Is he injured or something? Or
yeah, I think he's back training now, but he was injured for the start of the season. One that I threw out there, and I don't think it'll ever happen, just because of the club he plays at. But if I could get that guy I mentioned earlier, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, for a very reasonable price compared to what United paid for him, I'd take a fly on that. If I could get him for like 12, 15 million, I would definitely take a fly on that, because he is a complete opposite to Trent. He's a defensive right back. I know he's terrible on the ball, and he has been, but how much of that is situation and confidence, and how much of that is him? He's never been good on the ball, but
I reckon Klopp would get the best out of him.
Yeah, if you can get him in an environment where he's comfortable and confident, then he can at least be serviceable. He's never going to be an overlapping great sort of, but that's why you've got Trent in the team. So he doesn't need to do that, and then you have the balance probably a lot better. So if you could get, and he doesn't look like he's sniffing the United team, so if you could take a well-priced gamble on him, that's one that I'd look at. But there's no doubt that right back, there needs to be some competition there, because I think at times this season it's been Trent's lack of interest in defending. I think on the weekend it was actually a confidence thing. I don't think he didn't look confident. I don't think it was a lack of interest, but he didn't look confident in possession. He didn't look confident out of possession, and I think it really showed on the weekend. So we know defensively that's been a problem, but when he's not on it in possession, he becomes an absolute passenger in the game.
Yeah, it's and doesn't have confidence either, it looks like.
Yeah, it's a problem at the moment.
Yeah, so how do you fix a problem like Trent? That's the question. And something
build the squad a bit better.
But it's something that you guys need to actually sort out, because you guys, at least with the left back position, you have Tsimikas and Robertson, whereas with the right back you have no one. You got Milner there. Milner and Joe Gomez.
No, Milner can't be relied on. He could stay around the squad, but we can't be asking him to play any more than 10 games in all competitions in a season.
I'd love to see Milner v Martinelli next week.
No, please no. I'll take Trent over that. Just quickly as well, how things change though, because remember last season how much everyone was talking about Liverpool's squad depth. Well, look at it now. I mean, it looks shambolic at the moment. So football's fickle like that. Narratives change very quickly.
And weren't you at one point saying that this is... what did you say? That this was like the greatest team over the last 5 years or something? That was before the Champions League final.
Well, over the last 5 years, that doesn't change anything. If you take this team in a vacuum, you look at the 3 seasons, we've won the league on 99 points. any other season, if it's not for Manchester City, we win the league on 97 in that 18-19. Any other season that it's not Manchester City, we win the league last season. And then we've made 3 Champions League finals in 5 years. And probably any other team but Real Madrid, we probably have a better chance of beating them. I know we got Tottenham in one of those finals, so that sort of evened it out. But when I look at consistency across Europe, just for the fact that City didn't do it in the Champions League, I'd still put Liverpool as probably the best team over the last 5 years in Europe. I don't know. I don't know who
I
else you'd put there.
respectfully disagree.
Well,
what about Real Madrid?
Over the last 5 years, not 5. Maybe if you want to make it 10 and you include the three-peat,
They've still won more Champions Leagues and more leagues.
Yeah, but last season doesn't matter.
and then you got City as well. Like they made a final. Yes, they made one final. Yes, they lost one. But I think other than that, they've always made the semis over the last 5 years. So
City, I can give you, but I think that's a little bit disappointing if they're meant to be that team. They got to be at least making finals and breaking through for at least one. Yeah, to not win one Champions League.
Maybe they win it this year with Durant.
I mean, it's looking that way. But there's some good teams in Europe, so I'm not getting ahead of myself just yet.
Perfect way to lead onto it. Europe. We got the Champions League back tomorrow night. There's not really that many big games in this match day. You have Barca Inter at San Siro before they knock it down. And the other big one, I guess, is Chelsea Milan at Stamford Bridge under Graham Potter. I haven't watched Chelsea under Graham Potter though yet. I didn't watch Chelsea Crystal Palace, so I don't know what to expect. So that one's a bit of a I don't know, a little bit of a what would you say? Wild card for me.
It's a tricky one. He went to 4 at the back against Palace. I only watched the first half. I know they got the late winner, but they were thoroughly unimpressive in the first half. Fofana and Thiago Silva is not a centre-back partnership I want to hang my hat on. Nothing against Thiago Silva. He's just advanced in years. And Fofana, I mean, is just a wild signing. We could see it. We could see him go down as a Harry Maguire-esque signing, but maybe at least he has the physical
came from the same team
to make
too.
up for that. Yeah, I know. It's a massive overpay for me. So we'll see what happens with that one. But
around the same amount as well, 80 mil.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. No, it's madness. But yeah, Chelsea unimpressive against Palace, and they have 2 huge games in the Champions League where you think I think we already talked about it, but they need to 4 points has to be a minimum because they're on 1 point to start with the first 2 games. 4 points minimum against one of the top 8 sides, I would say, in Europe. That is not going to be easy at all. But Theo Hernandez, I don't know if he's back for these 1 or 2 or both of these ties. That's a massive loss for AC. AC, I watched them on the weekend in their game against Empoli. Yeah, you could tell that they were missing Theo Hernandez, but I think they created enough chances to win the game. They won it in dramatic fashion late on. I think Rebic, your man, finally got back into the team and scored. Scored in the last 10 minutes, and then Empoli equalised, I think, in stoppage time. And AC went on to score 2 more after that. So crazy scenes there. But with Rafael Leao, you give yourself a chance. He's in fantastic form. Obviously, Serie A Player of the Year last season. So that's a massive... Those 2 are intriguing because if Chelsea... and this is you can completely see this happening. If Chelsea only come out of those 2 games with 1 point, I can actually see that happening. They're out of the Champions League pretty much. So, 2 massive fixtures for them, 2 massive fixtures for Inter, who are absolutely, if we go across Milan over to them, 4 wins, 4 losses in Serie A is the record. Simone Inzaghi, is lucky to be working in Italy because they seem more reluctant to sack managers over there. You look at Allegri, for example, and now you look at Inzaghi. And I know last pod I flagged Tuchel for Inter. Well, I mean, they lost Inter lose on the weekend against Roma, and it seems that Inzaghi's demise might be a little bit closer.
Hang on.
They just can't. Yeah, go on.
You pair up the most notorious player-manager partnership.
With Lukaku. With Lukaku. But I guess that's the point. Like, that might be maybe it's a little bit of an unfair judgment on Inter at this stage without that guy in the team. But at the same time, Inzaghi's got to try something new. Inter are not playing well, and he's rigid in his 5-3-2, and the balance is completely wrong. Like I touched on with Perisic leaving, the balance just became wrong for a 5-3-2, and I would look at playing a 4 at the back and try and get more attackers into the team, and just try and change something because they're not playing well. Roma, who I don't think are playing that well themselves, although they have a mercurial talent in Paulo Dybala, who is probably one of the most fun players in Europe to watch this season. He looks motivated as well, which is fun to watch because talent-wise, he's. I know I went on my rant about Ruben Loftus-Cheek, but this guy actually has a lot of talent. So when he puts the mentality together with that, he's definitely a fun watch. So. But yeah, losing to Roma on the weekend for Inter, for me, all but puts them out of any title race, especially when you look at the quality of, we mentioned AC Milan. You look at the fun and the quality of Napoli. Napoli just continue to go on, and they're one of the best teams in Europe, the highest ranked team for me in terms of Serie A teams, and one of the highest ranked teams in terms of viewing pleasure this season. They have so many good attacking players, but they defend well. They're just so much fun to watch. I expect them to top the group with Liverpool and probably Ajax fighting it out for second spot. They obviously play Ajax back to back coming up, and I'm probably hoping that Napoli win both of them, just so that they just finish top and it gives us a better chance of finishing second. We're going to need to. We play at Anfield first against Rangers, so we need to win that game, and then we need to deal with the atmosphere of Ibrox when we go there. But yeah, so I think Inter, if they were to lose to Barcelona, if they were to maybe only pick up 1 point out of the two, and again, that's a plausible scenario, Simone Inzaghi, I think, will be on his way because that means they're not getting out of the Champions League group and they're faltering in Serie A. So yeah, it's definitely interesting in terms of Chelsea's chances of progressing. I'm interested to see if AC Milan as well need to progress out of the group, and I expect them to, but they need, like, can you also see Chelsea maybe getting 4 or maybe even 6 points from these two games? It can happen. I don't see it personally, but it can definitely happen. They have enough quality. And then all of a sudden, these questions that we have, they flip over to AC Milan's side and the lack of experience of getting out of a Champions League group. So, yeah, I think when you hit the back-to-back fixtures from Matchday 3 and 4, that's when we really get a picture of who's coming out of each group. So it's going to be fascinating to see how we stand at the end of this match day, but both match days in particular.
Yeah, and the fact that it's also not just it's back to back on, like, without that 1 week in between, whereas like last year at least it was 2 weeks in between, so you probably had more time to prepare, more time for injured players to come back as well. So it's gonna be a very interesting 2 weeks or 2 match days of Champions League football. But I think you've summed it up, like what you expect to see. Like other than there's not really that many interesting games. Like I said, like Benfica, Paris Saint-Germain could be an interesting one as well, and Sevilla Dortmund could be interesting, but Sevilla haven't exactly been firing on all cylinders, and like this team pretty much got would you say depleted or decimated by transfers?
I wouldn't say decimated. I'd say depleted.
Hmm.
I think we've already touched on it. The big problem for them is they lost their centre back partnership, and for all intents and purposes, that team was built on defence last season. But they have been pale. They've been really bad, and Atletico battered them, and they battered them at their place on the weekend. And just a little point on Atletico, it was actually easily Atletico's best performance of the season, and they played a 4-3-3. So we went in a little bit hard on Simeone, I think, last pod, in terms of being inflexible and just being diabolical to watch. Well, he changed it up a little bit. He had players probably in better positions, and they actually looked pretty good, like a decent watch in that game. So yeah, I'm really hoping Sevilla don't really get any results against Dortmund, because while Dortmund are inconsistent and while Dortmund still aren't a really great side, they lost on the weekend to Cologne 3-2, and that's 3 losses in the Bundesliga already. I still think they add more value to the competition than Sevilla at this present moment. Sevilla are at 6s and 7s, and that's another manager who I don't expect to last too much longer in Lopetegui at Sevilla.
Yeah, unless they drop down to the Europa League and just win that. So
Very true.
it's their bread and butter.
But that just before you go on as well,
Yeah.
the Benfica PSG back to
That
back.
could be that could be an interesting one.
No, they will be really good. Benfica are probably like one of the top 10 teams in Europe. I think they're still on their record of winning every game this season, which is just incredible. I know it's the Portuguese league, but they've also had 2 pretty big Champions League ties in there as well. So, and they have the team who has the potential to maybe expose some of those weaknesses we've sort of talked about PSG, or those things that we maybe want to see exposed, and see how PSG cope with it. So while it's maybe not the clash that dictates so much who's going to get through the group, unless PSG win both and then Juve are back in it with a shout of getting out as second. But I'm hoping that's not the case, because I think Benfica are objectively a better side than Juve. But yeah, that's just for footballing wise, not maybe for the stakes, but for the football. That's definitely a back-to-back I'm looking forward to watching, no doubt.
I agree. But look, I got nothing else to add on to the Champions League fixtures. Like, there's some juicy ones there that I will be watching. And I actually like that, like, they have a set of early fixtures as well. It's 6:45, so you can watch one fixture and then the next one. So that's really nice. Before we wrap up the pod, over the weekend, I think it was on Friday when we had our pod, for the preview. Like, did you end up watching Leverkusen Bayern?
Yeah, I did, and that was probably my next point as well. Just touching on.
Yeah. But one thing before we get into the game, for some reason, you know how, like, just like random thoughts come into your head. Like, Michael Ballack came into my head, and then, like, because he played for both teams, and then going off of that, like, branching off of Michael Ballack, I'm like, oh man, he came so close to winning the World Cup in 2002. Like, he was Germany's best player. But he missed the final because of the suspension, because he got like a yellow card in the quarters and then a yellow card in the semis. And then I also remembered Roy Keane also missed the 99 Champions League final because of the same thing. And I was like, I don't know if they've abolished that rule where they reset the yellow cards at the semi-final stage, but, like, they need to start doing that. Like, you can't have the best players missing out on finals of Champions Leagues and stuff. So if they have, good on them. If they haven't, they need to get around to that, because it's an absolute travesty that you don't have, that you have, like, that you have the best players in the world missing out. I think even, I'm not sure if Scholes also missed out on the 99 final because of suspension or
the one that springs to my mind is, I'm pretty sure Xabi Alonso missed out on the 2014 Champions League final.
That too, as well.
The same thing as well.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, I'm pretty sure they've changed it. I'm glad they've changed it because for accumulation of yellow cards, yeah, you can't
especially
be
in the
missing
tournament
finals.
format as well, like it's
Yeah, because
just
it's only 2 yellow cards. It's like it's nothing.
yeah. Like if it's two yellow cards, obviously in the same game, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Like suspend them for the next game, I can accept that. But like two yellow cards over two games, like it's really stupid. Also, what about in the leagues? How I think it's 5 yellow cards and you get an automatic suspension. What do you think about that one? Do you think that should be bumped up to 8 games or 7 or 6 or 10? Or are you
No,
fine with 5?
I'm happy. I'm happy with 5. Five's fine. That's a fair accumulation of cards. To
You
be
reckon?
fair, so yeah, I mean, you just don't pick up so many yellow cards.
Does it reset if you get a red card?
No, I
Or
think the way it works is once you get to the next layer mark, which is I guess it would be 10, might be more, but I think you might get a 2 game suspension when you get to the next layer mark.
eh,
So they're really trying to tell you stop getting yellow cards.
fair enough. Anyway, your thoughts on the Bayern game?
Oh, the game
It
Bayern played
was
pretty well.
yeah, but it was also like a couple of mistakes from Leverkusen, like they
Well,
as well. Like their keeper made I
yeah.
think like 2 howlers from memory.
Oh no, yeah. The keeper was terrible in the game, no doubt. And I look at the funny thing is I look at that Leverkusen team, and I think they should be right in the mix for top 4. Because you look at Patrick Schick, you look at Diaby,
My boy,
you look at
Haaland light.
yeah. Well, he doesn't look. He looks like very light Haaland at the moment because I'm a fan of Frimpong, Tar at the back. It's a team for Bundesliga standards should no doubt be in contention for top 4 for me. I also look at another team like Leipzig, who I feel exactly the same way, maybe even a little bit higher. I think they have enough talent to be in top 4, and they're languishing mid-table. So, but it's not so much views on the game because I think Bayern played how they
They
play,
also played really
but
well.
they
Yeah.
got their goals this time. Whereas in games, I know they'd come into this game drawing 3 and then losing 1 going into this game in the last 4 in the Bundesliga. But in pretty much all those games except for the loss, I thought they were good value to win. So they finally get their goals. It was almost like the ketchup bottle analogy. Finally, some sauce came out. But you look at the standings at the end of this weekend. Union Berlin lose as well. Dortmund lose, and all of a sudden Bayern are 2 points off the top. And ho hum, what crisis! I mean, this team, like I said when we were talking about them last pod, if we check in with them in a month, I fully expect them to be top of the league and maybe a couple of points clear at top of the league, maybe more than a game top of the league. So there's no crisis there. They're still travelling along, but obviously their main test comes in the Champions League where they've won 2 of 2. So that's one league that I only watched that game from the Bundesliga, and that's one league I'm really down on. If I had to rank all the 5 leagues, the Bundesliga is easily the 5th. Maybe not best, but 5th most exciting. I still might not put the French league above it, but the French league has some really exciting teams. When I watch Lens in particular, if you can watch a Lens game against a good team, they played Lyon on the weekend. In fact, if you can watch that game, if you have any time, they were relentless. Their energy was insane. They were all over Lyon, and Lyon aren't the best side, but they're not a bad side either. And on top of that, the atmosphere that they get at their stadium is fantastic. It's got really steep stands each side, and they have active areas pretty much everywhere. They have an active area on the halfway line as well, so you can always see that. They're a really fun team to watch, and as well, Lorient, who are really physical, really fun sort of when they get on the break, they're a good team to watch as well. So in terms of teams I like watching, the French league I think has more than the Bundesliga. And my idea was we probably won't do it today, but the idea was I think at some point we should touch in and maybe have a draft sort of format where we create a 20 team or maybe even a 16 team league out of who we think the best teams are this season in Europe. Not just in terms of like best, but who are the best to watch as well. Just the overall package. It'll be interesting to see how many teams we get from each league if we were to do that, because I know consensus normally is the Premier League is so strong, and the Premier League's all this and that, and look, I love the Premier League. I've grown up on the Premier League, but when I was doing it in my head the other day, I was like, you know what? It's not that heavy on the Premier League teams. There's a lot of teams from other countries who I think are well deserving of being in the top 16 of teams I've watched this season. So I just thought that might be a fun idea that we can probably touch on it at some point where we get a bit more dead period. But we had two, and we go back to it, but we had two really crucial games to analyze from the Premier League, which we did, and which obviously took time. And now we're back into the Champions League as well, which is going to take time. But yeah, just an idea to throw out there that we should probably get around to soon.
Yeah, I need to take off my my league snobbiness and try to watch a little bit more of the other leagues as well if I'm gonna get involved in something like that. But if it's being based on teams that are like exciting to watch, from the Premier League, like I wouldn't include Tottenham in that. They're not exciting to watch. No. I wouldn't include United.
But I would include them just on being good. You know,
yeah, but
they're not exciting.
But let's make it let's make it like the 16 most exciting teams, like instead of like good and exciting. But then Liverpool wouldn't be in that either because they haven't been.
Liverpool are pretty exciting to watch. They give away chances. They make chances.
They give away too many chances.
Exciting.
But like, I'd probably include like Newcastle, for instance, in that. And touching on them, they like we said that was going to be a fun game between Fulham and Newcastle, and it got marred by an early red card, unfortunately. Which then the game was pretty much a foregone conclusion.
Well, Fulham didn't help as well. Like I was talking about becoming on tilt really quickly. Like you just had to look at Marco Silva after that. Like I know he's probably upset that the game's gone that way, but his aura sort of said to the players, like this one's done, and we're just frustrated now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was marred by a red card. I think also in the Chelsea Palace game where there was a red card, wasn't there? If I'm not mistaken.
It was, I think it was in the second half.
Yeah, so it wasn't an early one. Yeah, but let's if there's any other closing thoughts that you may have regarding the weekend's action or the upcoming Champions League action, then
Well, I guess we touched on everything. Probably the last one to touch on is La Liga. Did you see the Lewandowski goal?
No, I haven't watched that. Usually I just go through the highlights of it, so I'll
just watch the highlights of that because the Barca weren't particularly entertaining in that game. But they did their thing again where they rotated the squad. It's PK finally played, Alba finally played. I don't know what's going on with team selection at Barcelona. I don't know what the rhyme or reason is for the way he rotates, but every week there's a different team. Like Cassie plays in this game as well. But the one constant is Robert Lewandowski, who is top tier, A1. I shouldn't have to say it, but like the transition that he's had going to Barcelona has been seamless. He almost looks like he's a better player at Barcelona than he had been at Bayern,
or was that just
particularly last season.
It's a weaker league defensively, potentially.
I wouldn't say that. I don't know if it's refocused him. I don't know if there was a cloud over him last season at Bayern and he always wanted this move away, but he does look refocused to me. And the goal he scored on the weekend was fantastic, chopping back in onto his right foot and putting it right in the corner in a 1-0 win. And what a great weekend for Barcelona in La Liga because Betis lose to Celta Vigo. Real Madrid can't get the win against Osasuna at home? I forget who they'll play, but Benzema misses a penalty in the 80th minute. Benzema's finally back, but he looked rusty. Real Madrid made changes in that game. Dani Ceballos starts. I don't know who the backup goalkeeper is, but he starts as well. So they didn't look their fluid best. Really good weekend for Barca. Really good weekend for Athletic Club, who won the Friday night fixture 4-0, I think. they're a team who I expect to be in the mix for Champions League come the end of the season. Good weekend as well for Atletico, who get that win against Sevilla, and I think now we're only 2 points off top four. So Spain is starting to heat up as well. There's some good teams there. It's still probably behind the Premier League and even Serie A for me in terms of excitement. But Spain obviously has two like top elite clubs, whereas Serie A, we might find out that AC and Napoli are really good if they make deep runs into the Champions League. But as it stands, they don't have those clubs. But yeah, I think because we touched on every league, I thought I just wanted to mention La Liga and what's going on there. And yeah, so I think I'm done. If you don't have anything else to add, then roll on the Champions League fixtures.
Roll them on. And Caleb, once again, it's been a pleasure. We'll be back towards the end of the week to preview another big game this weekend, and also to review the games from the Champions League. Hopefully they're as exciting as the games that came this weekend before us. But for everyone listening, thanks for coming, and bye for now.